Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, lovely people, depending on where you're watching us from in the world. I was counting down the days today because I'm so excited to have this young lady next to me. I'm going to share a quick story before I get Katie to introduce herself. Katie and I actually met on Dale Beaumont's stage. I almost want to say I had the absolute honor and pleasure to speak there a few weeks ago now. And Katie was in the audience because Katie is part of his beautiful business blueprint. And Dale has been a mentor for you for quite some time. I guess I'll let you share a little bit more about that. And it was such a pleasure to meet you at that event. I remember you came up to me, you gave me the biggest hug, and you and I had this instant connection. And I already had the pleasure of speaking on your podcast, and now I'm so excited to have you on mine. So without further ado, would you do us the honor and introduce yourself to our audience, please? Welcome, Katie.
Hello, thank you. Oh, you're gorgeous. I love you, and thank you for having me today. Look, probably the most simplest way to introduce myself is Katie Joy, the Global Butterfly, founder of theglobalbutterfly.com. And my greatest passion and life mission is to be a guide to help with soul aligned living. And whatever that transformation is for people from wherever they're at into their authentic self. That's probably the easiest way to say it.
Love it. Nicely wrapped up with a bow on top.
Christmas
Katie,
time.
exactly. Woohoo! I love your energy. I love your enthusiasm. You already know that, but I'm going to say it again here. And I love our connection. So I was really, really looking forward to unpacking your life a little bit, because when people see you now, you're like, wow, she's got her life together. She's happy. She's speaking. She's doing that. She's winning awards. She's incredible. Yet there was a path leading up to becoming who you are today and who you're still becoming. And I am very honored that you said that you would share it with us here today. So I'm going to ask straight out, Katie, what is your connection to grief?
Well, let's start with our meeting, because when I
Yep.
met you, you were on stage at Dale Beaumont's event in July. I was recently in November, but in July, in July, when I was sitting there at the front and I watched you, I connected with you before you even opened your mouth. Your energy got me.
Oh,
And
thank
it was just
you.
like, soul sister from my tribe. And I knew straight away that you were also an empath like me. I could feel it in your energy, but your story connected with me deeply. And I'm sure your audience is familiar with your story.
Yep.
Yep. So they're not familiar with me. My background before in my career was a paramedic. So in your story on stage, when you shared how your husband, passed in Perth, which is where I'm from, and
So
your
bizarre.
deep appreciation for the paramedics, there was just so many threads of connection there with us.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh. So of course I'm wiping away the streams of tears, because I'm
Oh.
totally understanding from that experience as the paramedic, and also from the experience as a soul sister friend. I was just like, I was all encompassed into the whole thing.
Yeah.
But my background from where I was at to where I am today, part of it is my career. As much as I loved it as a paramedic, it was always in the reactive stage. And I'm also extremely sensitive, very empathic. And so I don't know how woo-woo your audience goes, but I used to have a lot of
You
woo-woo
can be as woo-woo
experiences.
as you want to.
Well,
it will meet the right people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was quite a few things that were happening in my life in a personal and a professional way. So my marriage was also extremely toxic, as well, being a paramedic as well. So I'm here helping people, but I'm also I was drowning in my own relationship, which was, it was one of those charm and harm ones. Like, I'll say these right things, but I'm not going to do the right things, and pull you the other way. And it was just confusing, and I was upside down, inside out. I'd lost who I was. And that was part of the grief cycle in that space myself. And also I had been at the time convinced, that's a nice way of putting it, of relocating to a mining town, which was very far from all my family, my friends, all my hobbies. So again, another disconnection and sense of loss. But there was this sense of, I needed to be able to move forward. And I also during that period, in that personal aspect, on the professional aspect, the level of jobs that I'd go to, they were intensifying. So I don't want to, because I don't want to create a graphic situation, but it was a lot, right? And I wanted to be doing something more meaningful and purposeful, where I could help people in the proactive stage of life, not in the reactive at the last minute, or when there's loss already there. And so, you know, there's a long part of my journey, but to give the short aspect, I made a very tough decision to leave that marriage and relocate back to Perth. But I realized my career time was done as well. And so I separated from that, and I went on initially a 3-month journey on a global trek, like to go find myself. Funny thing is, like, all those aspects of yourself travel with you. So you've got to go inward, not outward.
Both helps, I guess.
That 3-month journey turned into 4 years of me putting in my energy, time, and money into investing in myself for my own growth. I did training on business, marketing, healing. I did lots of travels and lots of fun, adventures, 7 continents, 58 countries. But all of that ultimately was avoiding the inner pain.
Sorry, I need to pause you here for a second, because I feel like we're already galloping ahead into the solution, but for my audience, we're sitting there going like, how on earth do you make that decision? Because I know, and you know that too, that a lot of people are sitting in a relationship where they feel, they might not even know it consciously yet, but they feel or know that they're in a wrong relationship, that is unhealthy for them. And for somebody to sit there and say, oh, I made the decision to leave my partner, that feels easy, and I know it's not, and you know it's not. Is there anything that you can share with our audience that will help them in terms of what was your process that got you to that, I need to get out of here, this is not healthy for me anymore, and then actually acting upon it? Because that's the key part here. You know, a lot of people think and know they need to get out of it, but then they don't act upon it out of fear. And you went past that. How?
Very quick.
Can you share that?
Thank you. And yes, how deep do you want me to go?
As deep as you want to. It's your stage here, and I just feel as deep as you feel the audience needs to hear it to make the decision if they are in a situation like that.
So I'm going to give you permission to dig in deeper if you want, but it's a very dark journey, just so you know, right?
That's okay.
And that's why I probably do skip over it, because it's done, and it's also what makes me valuable to help serve people, because I have gone to the depths of hell.
Exactly.
So, all right, let me back that truck up. So day one of moving into this house in, I won't say the location, so I can, you know.
That's okay.
But it was a mining town, right? A hot northwestern mining town of Australia.
Into the location when you were in that relationship, that was
correct. Yeah. He was also my boss, so he was a station manager. So he was in my life 24/7. There was no detachment, right? And it was sort of authority, and manipulation, control in every quarter, right? So it was challenging. Now, to back that up, I had also financially got him out of, I inherited $250,000 in debt when we got married. And I got us out of that and moved to 1.3 million in a 6-year period.
That alone is incredible.
Thank you. But it's also, it's part of my story of why I struggled to let go, because I built so much. And I was like, and I had to let go of all that material for my sanity and eventually rebuild again. But that was, I thought that if I just make enough money and we didn't have to worry about our jobs, that would release and keep us congruent with the goal and the vision that we had agreed to. Because my plan was to be a full-time mum and work if I want to, not as an option, but not have to because we needed money. And at that time, I'd invested a lot in a massive real estate property portfolio. Now I do online digital real estate property. But back then, that day one of moving in, that was the pivot point, because there were already tons of red flags before we moved. But when we moved, remember the agreement was 2 years, but he was 6'7" and standing over me as I was sitting on the couch unpacking. I used to have lots of crystals, and I used to have this little elephant planter with a flat back that I used to store all my favorite crystals on. And I was unpacking this little wooden carving elephant, Balinese style. And he's standing over me and goes, "Now imagine what it'd be like living here after 5 or 7 years." And I remember for the first time in my head having a full movie of clocking him on, being very unspiritual, clocking him on the head with this thing, just like, oh my God, you know, in a mental reaction to the clarity of what he was revealing with no intention of honoring an agreement. So that began a unraveling of massive trust and also grief, like, because now I'm in a place I thought I could put up with for 2 years, but now I'm away from all my family, all my friends, all my familiarity, completely isolated,
all your
and now
security,
completely controlled in every manner you can imagine. So hello narcissism. And on the extreme end, right, there's sociopathy involved in there as well, but even psychopathy. But the journey that began a 2-year journey of me having to step into aspects of myself that I didn't want to take responsibility for in the beginning. I wanted to completely trust with my heart on my sleeve, and you know, but I realized I had to honor myself because I had abandoned my own self in that process. So there was a grief part there when I realized that. But I kept trying to make it work. I was moving my path forward, but I was still trying to make the relationship work. But the more I did that, the darker it got, because, and there were ultimately 3 life attempts on me. One of them involved, and the snap point, I can go deeper in any of these if you want to, but the snap point was after we had agreed to separate. The first time I asked for a separation and he didn't like that, he took a knife to my throat, right? It was dark. And so I placated and agreed to stay. But then about 6-7 months later, he then flipped it on me and said, well, I want to separate. And I said, yes, because now he's breaking the vow, right? And I could keep saying, well, you initiated this, But as part of that build up of 1.3 million net worth, I wanted to make sure that when he got half of it, he was going to look after it and grow it. And I had been involved with Tony Robbins, with his Platinum Partner Group later on. But at that point, I was we went to Melbourne for the Wealth Mastery, and we shared accommodation. It was a large apartment with twin beds, but he had snapped on day 3 and woke me up at 2 o'clock in the morning, beating the living hell out of me and trying to suffocate me with the mattress. And it was just violent as you can get. I managed to escape that situation in my pajamas. It was July of 2007 in Melbourne. And I managed to he'd fallen over in the lounge room after pulling me around and being really awful, right? 6'7" dude, big. And I jumped over the top of him, ran out of the apartment, made my way down to the bottom of the lifts. There was no one at the reception. It was a fairly smallish apartment complex. Running out to the street in pajamas and socks, flagging down a taxi who gave me, because I had no money, nothing, who gave me a free ride to the police station. And it was
bless him.
So
or her, I don't know.
Him. And then at the police station, I actually had 2 women police officers, and they took over. Like I was still in shock. I was still like, hey, listen, this is what's going on. But then I'm, they're like, this isn't cool. They're taking my whole documentation. They intervened, put a AVO and all these sorts of things. But the funny thing is, I'm like trying to this is the survival mechanism. Like, it's not, let's be nice approach. And they're like, no, we're not being nice. So I look back at that part of myself who still wants to believe that he could change, but they were like, no, we've seen this enough. And the truth is, I had seen it enough too as a paramedic. I'd seen the devastation of what
But isn't it just such a strong sign for we really do need the outside perspective when we're right in the middle of it. We can't see the whole picture. We're right in it, and so I think it's really great that you have that outside
Yeah.
perspective with the two police women. Yeah.
So I had we still have one more day of this event before leaving, but I had the presence of mind to go and photocopy the documentation from the police report and double envelope them and post them off to my best friend at the time, who was a police officer in WA, a colleague at St. John Ambulance, and my parents. And on the middle envelope,
Wow.
I said, only open if something happens, because I didn't want them to read it
Far out.
immediately, right? But I was securing myself because I just had this sense of, okay, we're here in Melbourne and the AVO is for Melbourne, but the minute we cross the border, if we don't, because I was planning on going off to Europe during a period of annual leave, and I'm like, oh, I'm not giving that up for you. I mean, I've got this now. I don't need to go to court here, and it's too hard being in Melbourne. So when I did come back from that trip in Europe, he did try to intimidate me. And I just said to him, you know who has copies of that police report in envelopes ready to open if you do anything. And from that moment on, he backed off. But during that process, he was still trying to get me to stay with him. By the way, during that period when he's lost his nana at me, he was dating 3 women. None of them knew about each other. One of them he's now married to. But the big clip point for me as well was he was begging me to stay. But I also had found some paperwork that was in his room because we'd separated rooms, on his bed. And I'm sure he placed it there intentionally for me to see. But there was paperwork for her young 5-year-old at the time daughter to be enrolled in a local school. And I'm like, oh, this is just doing my head in, right? I mean, I'm in this complete, and I just, there was this whole sense of grief that permeated through my relationship, myself, my career. I just thought, how am I in this? And I'm a paramedic, and I'm like, I go help people get out of these situations, and I'm in it. And so it had a big devaluing on myself. Like I allowed it to devalue me, you know? And so all of those were very challenging.
I can understand that.
Yeah. And, you know, when I moved back to Perth, he had flipped the script and got into the heads of being my boss. He had, made me my reputation, as in I'm the gold digger. I'm like, dude, this will be revealed very soon. So it goes much darker than all of that, but that was a pretty defining period of time. But you know, the day that the financial separation went through, I know he went and bought a brand new 4-wheel drive, a brand new motorbike, and like their doodads and liabilities. Whereas I had used it to move forward, and 6 months later, after going back to Perth, I realized I'd match my income from my property passive income to my career income, and that's what set me free. And I was just like, I'm done. I'm ready to move to that next phase. But it was a very healing phase and a long healing phase. I kept looking for exciting things to distract me from confronting and doing a lot of the deeper healing work. I was doing it, but it was so deep, so twisted. It took me a long time to really rediscover who I really am.
Can I just want to, first of all, say thank you so much for sharing this, because I understand how deep that goes. And as you said, there's a lot more darkness behind that. I really feel this is so honoring for us, for you to share that with us and allow us to hold space for you in that. So thank you. I absolutely want to applaud you for what you did, for thinking so clearly, for double enveloping that. Is that the right word? My bilingual brain, for sending 2 envelopes to have that safety net that you created for yourself. And I think that's the key word here that I want the audience to get away with, you know, that whole have a safety net, document it, let other people know. That is such an important message here that I really wanted to highlight from your story. So thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Just a little bit on that.
Sure.
if I may.
Of course.
A big part of that was because of my career as a paramedic and for what saw so much of.
Yeah.
But then also the pattern in the relationship that I was in, it was this
Mm.
constant, I'm going to change, I'm going to do this, and the behavior was always
Yeah.
different. And so I
Yeah.
think that was I was so shocked by and bruised and battered that I was like, he's gone so far over the line. I can't
Mhm.
believe words. This is the evidence, right?
Yeah.
And so I had a medical documentation. I had that medical. I had the police report.
Yeah.
But and from that point on, I also kept a journal. I documented everything:
Mm.
dates, times, what happened,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
exchanged. And being a paramedic, I think having that awareness around that, and that's what had the clarity around, look, I've seen so often what happens when
Mm.
I don't you
Yeah.
can't believe that love is just going to change people who get so twisted in their
Mm.
thinking that if they can't have you, no one's going to have you. And
Yeah.
I've seen it too many times, and people who take their own kids and take their lives as well, because it just becomes this, well, if I can't have you, no one can have you, no one can have
Mm.
access. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to drive that point home. It's dark, but it's a reality, and it's something that
Mhm.
you can protect yourself, safeguard yourself by
Yeah.
documenting, not emotionally. You can do
Mm.
that separately in
Facts. Yeah.
another diary, but just
I
the
love that.
facts,
Yeah.
dates, times, incidents, witnesses, what was said, quote unquote, and
Yeah.
recording things as quickly as you can. Yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible. Thank you so much for that. I think the biggest takeaway from me here, and a very general takeaway, not just for domestic violence, is the words, like actions speak louder than words, basically. They really trust their actions rather than their words. It's so easy to fork out words, the right words at the right time, but it's all manipulation, yeah. A really beautiful mentor of mine, I actually reconnected with him yesterday, Reese. He said to me once, if people show you their true colors, believe them.
Believe them.
And I love that. This sentence has been with me for the last 3-4 years since he said it to me. And he said it to me in, yeah, in a time where I really needed to hear it. And it really helped me a lot to stay true to myself and ask for what I deserve and choose that path. I think the biggest one is to really come back to self, come back to
Yep.
who you are, rediscover who you actually are throughout and who you have become through the trauma, through the DV situation, whatever it is. So, how was that journey for you? That journey back to Katie Joy, rediscovering who you are, what you want, your dreams, etc.
Yeah, I love that question. And let me give it to speak to, like, because I'm sure some people don't have domestic violence in their relationship, but they're having
Yeah,
this violent,
thank goodness, of
relationship
course.
with maybe a boss or a colleague or even a
Yeah,
client, right?
yeah,
Which, ugh,
yeah, yeah,
that can
yeah,
make you
yeah,
want to stab
absolutely.
yourself in the eye real
Good
fast.
point.
Or then,
Do not, do not attempt that at home. Disclaimer.
no.
Beep.
No, but and I always say, feel all the feels, but don't act on all of them, right? So, because
Wow,
that's
good
an
point.
important part, because during this process, what makes people stay stuck is they feel guilty or shameful for the thoughts they're having. So I talk about, the
Mm.
elephant, and I want to clock them on the head,
I
right?
was just thinking of that again as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I said that for a reason. And it's because,
Mm.
look, I know, having worked with thousands of people now, that everybody has these dark thoughts, but no one wants to
Hmm.
admit them because it makes me a
Yeah.
bad person. And
Mm.
now you're going energetically into a guilt and shame spiral. And that will just
Mm.
keep you stuck because you think that you've already done it because you've just imagined it in your head.
Hmm.
Right. So it's about having the
Yeah.
self-awareness to, okay, wow, that was an interesting thought. What is that really bringing up for me? Okay, that violated boundaries and I'm really
Mm.
angry about it. And that was that part of me that doesn't know how to communicate clearly and effectively yet. That's just, right. So what would I need to learn to communicate more effectively? Now,
Mm.
back in the beginning, I didn't have that kind of quality of language yet, to be really
Yeah.
frank. that was a learning path. But
Yeah,
I
of course.
was very aware that I had that very mental image. It was a movie, and in my head I was like so like angry, like, because I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa, you've totally deceived me. And deception and betrayal is a huge cousin. Well, it's a stepway to grief, right? Because it's a
Yeah.
loss. It's a loss of trust. And even then you second guess yourself. And that was the biggest part I had to go back in and learn for myself, is to trust myself. So how I
Yeah,
stepped through that.
that's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I knew I couldn't trust him.
Mm-hmm.
But when I realized I'd abandoned myself in the fear of being abandoned by him, I moved into, well, I can't trust him, and I'm not really trusting myself, because now I don't even know what's up, down, left, right. Where do I begin repairing that trust? And I thought, I'm going to reshift my focus onto the things that make me feel good. So I put my energy in going to the gym. I put my energy into writing a cookbook.
This is what I prepared earlier.
It's not
I love
available
it.
anymore, but I just wanted to physically show this. This is where I poured my energy into. It's not
That is
available
so
anymore.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had my own digestive issues going on and stuff. So I just thought, well, let me do the healing myself. And by the way, a lot of those digestive issues, that's a whole nother program. But like
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
that is because you aren't digesting life, right? There's behind every medical, I have become aware that there is an emotional block behind every medical.
Oh, 100%. And even
And
the
even
language that we
trauma.
use, the language that we use around that, I can't stomach this anymore. Like, just listen to
Yep.
what you're actually saying. Yeah.
Even trauma. People go, oh, it's an accident. But if you are aware and unpack all the thought thinking that you were thinking about before, you actually coincided co-creating that situation. That's a tough one to chew on, right? But
Yeah.
that's a whole nother segue, and probably another interview. But yeah, going back into trusting myself, doing things that would light me up. So taking care of my body, because I needed to feel better physically. I wasn't sleeping well. I was always waking up at 3 a.m. and ironing in that time, right? So rather than allow myself to mentally stew and spew all this conflict in my head, if I got up, I did something that was productive. I ironed and I listened to something empowering. So I just decided that as painful as it was, I'm going to start that journey. And let me tell you, metaphorically, I was dragging my feet, limping along, sometimes crawling along that pathway. But the pain
But
of
you were moving
staying where
forward.
I was at was too painful. And it had got to that point. And look, truthfully, most people don't make a shift until they hit their rock bottom.
Yeah.
My message would be, make your rock bottom much higher.
I love
Right?
that.
Don't
You're already taking the
wait.
message away, but I'll ask you at the end. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It's so important though, because I know I remember working. I went through a phase where I did hypnotherapy with a really incredible hypnotherapist, and he said to me, most people only come when the pressure of suffering gets too high, and it's exactly what you just said. That the rock
Yep.
bottom. I love that message. Make your rock bottom higher than it is. Yeah.
And the other thing that I did so that I could leverage myself forward is I created a plan to become financially free. Like I was already on that planned pathway,
Yeah.
but I knew I
Yeah.
had to shift gears because I was still building. We had joint finances and everything that I had, because that was the way I was willing to do it. I was willing to take on the debt because I've got such fantastic manifestation skills and business skills and investment skills and all. I was like, that's not not that big of a problem. It's
We'll do
about
that.
right. We have to
Yeah.
do some, cut back on instant gratification. That's the toughest thing most people don't want to do. But that's because they don't have a clear vision. So the thing I did was create a super clear vision of a empowered version of myself, even though physically I wasn't there yet. And so mentally I would go inward and play that movie. And so it helped me direct my decisions that I was making. So I was building up
From that
initially.
point. Yeah.
I bought more properties while we were still together because I knew it would be more that we could split. Right? Because I knew through the asset split, this is something I always say to everyone. I said, I knew I'd lose half of the material, but he'd never get half my brain, because I was
Mm-hmm.
walking away with that. And so
And you were the
if
one
you're,
making the decision and having the knowledge about it. He was the one raking in the money and now just wasting it, you know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he was getting the benefits of all my work, because I try to encourage him to be part of, I don't call them budgets, I call them intentional financial allocations, so that you have a better,
Love it.
right? Like, how
Yeah.
are you intentionally
Yeah.
allocating your funds so
Yeah.
that you are living in alignment with your vision, your values, and your goals? Whereas most people hear,
Mm-hmm.
budget restriction, but they have got
Mm-hmm.
no
Mm-hmm.
intentional plan for why they're cutting back
Mm-hmm.
here, because it serves them better to put it here, right?
Yeah.
Knowledge, skills. These 5 things that you need to build if you're in a situation,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're in a job that you don't like and you want some freedom, you're in a relationship you don't like and you know you want to move forward with some freedom, or maybe there's some other version of that where you were asking me, where did I begin? I began with looking at, what knowledge do I have, what skills do I have, who's in my network that is my network, right? So I'm managing those relationships and building those, making sure that I was looking at my resources. So I had a plan. I was going to build bigger, to be abundant, that we could both
Mm-hmm.
separate. I wasn't trying to hoard. I was just
Yeah.
building abundance that we could just both separate. So I had a point for me that I thought, okay, at that point, I know I can go and rebuild. By the way, when we did split, it was 650,000 in assets. It was like 4
Mm-hmm.
houses each.
Mm-hmm.
And in 6 months, what took me 6 years prior, took me 6 months, I got my net worth back up to 1.3 million because of knowledge and
That
skills.
is incredible.
Building my network,
Incredible.
yeah,
Yeah.
knowing what resources I have and leveraging off those resources and being resourceful. Write that one down,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Being
Write
resourceful,
that
because I
one
hear all the
down.
time, all right for you. I'm like, no, I was resourceful. I found, with my knowledge and my skills, I found deals, and I asked people, I told people, and they would want to invest in it. And it's just
Yeah.
these using other people's money. So,
Katie,
yeah,
sorry. We are literally over time now. I don't mind to go a couple of more minutes, but what I really, really would love for you to share before we go is 2 things. Um, One, I want you to maybe wrap us up a nice little bow on top. How is it that you can help people? And 2, I would like to share what is your main takeaway that you would like people to get from this. I know we're over time, but if you could wrap that up, that would be fantastic. I really want that to be, there for the audience to take, please.
awesome. Love it. Whatever, let me just finish, because there's 5 assets. So
Sure.
there's knowledge, skills, there is network, reputation, resources and reputation, right?
Yeah.
Now, reputation begins with yourself. The key
Mm.
message is lean in and trust yourself. And if you don't do that yet, then you need to develop and build on it with small baby steps and commit to agreements with yourself and follow through. So if you say, I'm going to take care of myself today, then take care of yourself. Don't leave it
Mm-hmm.
last on the list after taking care of everyone else
Mm.
and all their needs and all the bills and everything else. Prioritize
Yeah.
your self-care. Make your rock bottom higher. Like,
Love it.
don't leave it until you are completely depleted and you're not resourceful, and you delete and distort all of the available assets you actually have, but it just feels like they're not there because you're so disconnected. So
Yeah.
tune in, trust your higher self, and
Love
that's
it.
the most important relationship that you'll ever have.
Perfect. I love it.
Thank you.
How is it that you help people? How can they connect with you?
Oh, I love it. Look, they can find me on theglobalbutterfly.com. I'm also on YouTube at Katie Joy 88.
Mm-hmm.
You just look for Katie Joy.
Mm-hmm.
The Global Butterfly. There's a few Katie Joys out there, but
Yeah.
on Facebook, Katie Joy, the Global Butterfly. Instagram, Katie Joy, the Global Butterfly. But how I help people is I really help be that guide for soul aligned living when you feel lost or disconnected, or maybe you
Yeah.
feel like you've achieved everything, got to the top of the mountain, you're going, is this it? Right? So
Yeah.
those are indicators that there's deeper purpose to be tapped into. And I am exquisite at helping people heal, awaken to their higher self, and to manifest in a soul aligned way.
I love this. I love you, Katie. I'm so grateful that you shared all of that depth with us and all of that wisdom with us. I can highly recommend for anyone who is in this, oh my God, I don't know where to go with this. I am in a relationship where I'm not happy. I do need help with building my empire, whatever it is. I know that Katie can help you. I know this from the bottom of my heart. So if you don't know Katie enough after this interview, don't lean on my trust in her. I really, really value you so much, Katie. And we will be sharing all the links how you can get in touch with Katie in the show notes below. Show notes below. That's a mouthful. And I also want to encourage you, if there was something in there where you're like, oh, I really need to share this with that person, the first person that comes up, or hundreds of them, please share that. Please share the interview, because I feel there are so many golden nuggets in there that people need to hear. Go along, share the interview. And if you love what you hear, then please feel free to subscribe for our weekly updates on Unsilence Grief. We have one more episode to come for season 5. I will wrap this up next week with my final interview for season 5. So, Katie, thank you so much for being here. And everybody else, have a beautiful day.